We begin in Washington. Attorney General Merrick Garland has assigned a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney to review the documents marked classified in an office once used by Biden before he ran for the presidency.
Now, these materials were discovered by the president's personal lawyers shortly before last term's midterm elections. Mr. Biden used the vice presidential office at the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement there in D.C. periodically following the end of the Obama administration. Now, his lawyers returned the paperwork to the National Archive the day after they were discovered. Joining us now to talk about this from Capitol Hill is Congressman Darrell Issa. He represents California's 48th Congressional District and served on the House Judiciary Committee during the last Congress. Congressman, welcome to CBS News. First up, let's get your reaction to documents marked classified being uncovered at President Biden's former office.
Well, it raises a lot of questions, but one of the most important questions is 6 years after leaving office, how were they just discovered now or just before the election? And then 6 days before the election when they were discovered, in light of what had already happened with the raid on former President Trump's home, why in the world was it so critical to keep it covered up until now? Those two questions will need to be answered.
Congressman, just days after the FBI seized documents marked classified from former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home, you tweeted that the Department of Justice broke precedent and may have even broken rules to, as you said, target the former president. Many people feel like the Justice Department and the FBI in that case were overreaching. Do you believe that the Justice Department officials are now doing the same thing by assigning a U.S. attorney to investigate these documents?
Oh, no, not at all. The investigating versus show up with guns drawn and tell the Secret Service to stand down, there's a huge difference. Publicizing and doing a SWAT team type show up versus the documents being transported to the National Archives, and in this case, months going by before we even know. No, it's really the question, and I think it should be, of was that showmanship of raiding the president versus demand the documents, get the documents, and send them to the National Archives. The fact is, there are some other questions, like President Trump had the right to declassify, Vice President Biden did not. But I think those questions are less important than the real question of, is DOJ playing politics by not disclosing this until now versus making a show of it when they raided President Trump for documents that he would have turned over had they been demanded, even though he disagreed with the question of whether or not he had declassified them.
It's interesting because listening to your answer, it sounds as if you feel this incident may be more serious. Just to fact check some of what we know, these documents marked classified at the Penn Biden Center were voluntarily turned over and self-reported. In contrast, former President Trump refused to comply with repeated requests to return those materials seized from Mar-a-Lago. Yeah. So am I getting this right? Do you sense a difference in gravity?
Well, I appreciate it. One of them occurred a few months after leaving office, and the president apparently felt that he had a right to them. He had declassified them. But that's, I'm not objecting to a good, stern look at President Trump and those documents. But again, the president has the unilateral right to declassify. The vice president does not. But the real question is, why so public with President Trump when there was obviously a dispute between them as to these classified documents versus Vice President Biden, who I appreciate that they discovered it, but what happened for 6 years? Why did Joe Biden have it? Who all had seen it during the intervening period? Why were classified documents in his possession when, in fact, he did not have the right to keep and hold them? And the closet there was clearly not a SCIF. In other words, it was not a safe storage place for those kinds of documents.
Yeah, and in neither of these cases was it a SCIF. Congressman, does this, I appreciate that there are distinctions between these two cases. Do you feel like overall there is a problem with both President Trump or former President Trump and in that case, current President Biden having these classified documents in non-SCIF areas?
Well, thank you for asking that question, because during my tenure overseeing the National Archives, I very much believe that the process needs to be further reformed. Presidents, vice presidents, members of the cabinet, none of them should leave with any documents before they are cleared for release to them, versus the idea that you leave with them and then turn in documents as you discover them. The reality is that the process is somewhat broken and needs further reform. But I think the other part of it is also there, which is how this is being made public and publicizing it. One before an election, the other only after an election. That difference matters when it comes to looking at the Department of Justice and others. But I will tell you, I am very concerned that we need to reform the process so that there isn't overclassification, but also so that the National Archives have the documents and they clear them as documents that can be retained, either classified or unclassified. I actually don't have a problem with former presidents having, if you will, a SCIF with that, because that can be very helpful. But it should be done under the auspices of an executive branch. And right now, I think there's some real questions about that. But, you know, just to clarify, with Hillary Clinton, we had a similar situation where they wanted credit for turning over documents that she never should have had on an unclassified server, and many of her people got to see them long before they got turned in. So this isn't the first time or the second time that we've had a broken process, and it seems to happen with both parties. So I do think that there are two investigations Congress needs to do, one leading to changes in the National Archives authorities to hold documents before they leave the White House or cabinet positions. And then the second one, which is equally important, which is this whole question of when and how the Department of Justice moves forward with things publicly. It shouldn't be allowed to be politicized, and I think it has been, both by what they did and what they failed to do 6 days before the election.
Certainly you hope that our institutions can have aspects of it that are apolitical, and the National Archives would be part of that. Congressman Darrell Issa, thank you for joining us.
I want to put a shout out to the National Archives. They have been good actors in this process.
Congressman, thank you very much.